Brands on Brands.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This week we'll be talking about content discovery, how to get your content discovered using paid, owned, and earned media. Today, especially, we're focusing on owned media, so check it out.
In a world where advertising is ignored, business is exposed, and the only constant is change, how do you build a brand that matters? Welcome to Brands on Brands on Brands, a home for those who think different and push their boundaries. This is where branding that matters lives. Now, here's your host, Brandon Birkmeyer.
Hey, welcome to Brands on Brands on Brands. I'm Brandon Birkmeyer, your personal marketing coach, and I believe that building a brand that matters is the only way for a business to thrive tomorrow. I appreciate you guys being here today. Well, today we're talking about content discovery for all my content creators out there, specifically how to use paid, owned, and earned media channels to get your content discovered. Now, this is going to be a 3-part series, and we'll start with owned media and dive into that a lot today. But before that, if you would like to refer back to any of the specific lessons from today's episode, go to brandsonbrands.com/138 for the full blog and downloadable resources. Also, to let you guys know, I help people out who want to develop their personal brands. And if you are out there, you're listening, you decide you'd want to work with me to audit your podcast idea or your marketing plan, or to work on your personal branding and your show, go to brandsonbrands.com/coach to set up a free consultation. Now let's jump into the show.
Brands on Brands.
All right. Owned media for content discovery. Now, a lot of you are out there and you might be thinking, well, yeah, I've thought about this and maybe I want to figure out, how can I get people to find what I create? Because if you're creating content, but no one finds it, that's, obviously a huge waste of time. Putting all this work into it, you want people to listen to it. If they don't find it, it's like building a billboard out in the middle of the desert. And, if no one's driving by it, they're not going to see it. Doesn't matter how pretty it is. So it's your job to make sure you're figuring out how to help people find it, how to help people find that content that you've created. And to do that, we all need to understand basically how media channels can help create content discovery. And I'll break this down. I'll try to keep it simple for you. We'll be going into basically what owned media channels are, what the role is that they play in helping you be discovered, and some tactics you can use within your own media to help that happen. And the content discovery plan for any of us is really built on the foundation of owned media. So this is why I wanted to start with this. I think it's your number one asset in the communication channels that you control, and also includes platforms that you build followings on. So we'll talk about that. So basically, what is it? Let's start with that. What is owned media? Now, that's going to be the content you create and publish on your own channels. So think about that. The content you create and publish on your own channels. That can be your website. That can be a blog that's within your website. That can be videos or webinars or things that you create that you place on other people's sites. That might be a YouTube channel or a social media site or a podcast or a blog website, as I mentioned. All of these areas are places where you put a stake in the ground and you say, this is where my content will live. Now, the most ownable of those is going to be your website because you actually pay for the hosting of that. You build it, you control it. But also the content you create and you distribute on social media channels is also under your control. You decide when to push it out, where to put it, and then you're kind of sharing that with them because they decide how many people to show it to. But as you develop followings in those places, you own the content creation and distribution part of that. So the way I want you to think of it is that as you're creating content and publishing to your own channels, first think about the kind of things you create. That could be expert content, things that help tell your story, tell why you are doing what you're doing in your business, how you're positioning yourself against other content that's out there. It could be stories from your customers. It could be reviews and testimonials. It could be you exploring your field and your industry in like a journalism type format. It could be webinars where you're teaching. It could be videos, blogs. podcasts, any of that stuff. It could just be simple social media and shared posts. All of that is you creating a body of work that you own that comes directly from you, and you own all that. And the reason this is important, that owned media is important and creating this is important, is because that content tells your story. It shares your message. It positions you as the authority or as a prominent player in your industry. And without that, there's no way for the consumer to understand what it is that you're all about, that you want to be known for. So you start with that owned media that you place on your own channels. And the role of those channels, the reason you do it is because, number one, you need to create some kind of social proof of what you're all about. People need to understand when they look you up what your story is and what you stand for. Also, it plays a role in creating thought leadership. You don't just want to be another person in your industry. You want to be known for something. And you do that through creating thoughtful and engaging and helpful content that is useful to your specific audience. And within content marketing, the role of owned channels also is to become a place where you can create direct communication with your customers. It's great to create things, but what you want is a place for you to take what you've created and connect it to the people that are going to listen to it. So if you don't put it anywhere, there's nowhere for it to be found. So the first place is, establishing where this is going to live. And then once it's there, you can establish a direct communication. So either that's someone follows you on your social media or on your podcast or on your blog, they subscribe. And now because of that, they are starting to receive a regular stream of information from you, or they subscribe to your email list. And now you can directly send them communication every week or every day that comes from you as you see fit. You design it, you decide when to send it out, and you send it. That direct line of communication is the most important piece of any person's business. That list that you can continue to grow, that subscriber base that you continue to grow and nurture, and that communication that you can establish helps you nurture your customers over time, helps you introduce yourself to them and build that know, like, and trust factor so that they get to know what you're all about. Because not everyone, when they first meet us, is ready to buy from us. So it starts that process. And it also helps you build your brand identity and establish what you want to be known for. You're the one in charge of your image and deciding what you want to tell people so that they understand what you're all about and why they should listen to you, work with you, and whatever else. And also the role of your owned media channel is to develop some kind of customer experience. When people engage with your content, they are experiencing you in however you want to come across, whether that is as the teacher or as the guide or as someone giving them tools, whatever that is, you're designing that customer experience. And those things you own, those channels you own, help you do that. You could also own other media channels that are also things like an actual event, an in-person event, a live experience, a workshop. Those are all owned channels that you can create to design a customer experience. Could be a digital course, whatever it might be. All of those are owned channels. And the more of them that you create, the more you have a place for your customers to come and show up and connect with you as a business or as a brand. So that's the role of owned channels. And then the most important piece of this that I want to talk about today is the discovery tactics, because after all, this is the part of the season where I want to help you guys figure out how to get people to find your content that you're putting on these own channels. And I think this is the part that gets neglected the most. And it's really what I'm excited to talk about today is I think a lot of us understand that we can create content and we can put it on places where it can be found, like on a website or on a social media channel, but just simply putting it somewhere isn't enough to get it to be found. You can place a social media post on a website or on a social channel, and if you have 0 followers, that means 0 people are going to see it. To be honest, if you have 100 followers, maybe 3 people will see it, because that's the average that they show your content to people. And if you produce a podcast, you might have 0 people listening to it. You actually have to get out there and help people find the content that you're creating. So creating the channel and putting content on it is just step 1. You actually have to figure out how you're going to get people to discover it. So obviously, first step is establish your channel presence. Pick these places that are easy to find, that's ownable. So the name of your website and the name of your handles and the profiles and how you describe what your show is or what your business is all about. Obviously, that's step 1. You build those channels and you set them up so that when people do find them, they are seeing and hearing your story. So establish your channels and get them so that other people don't, and make them hopefully consistent across all the different channels in terms of the name of them and the description of them. But then you've got to work to optimize for discovery. And that's going to be different for each platform. That, one by one, you have to figure out how does this particular owned channel reach people? How do people find these types of channels? So you can start and go down the list. But for a website, which is usually the hub of all of this, a website, you can build it, no one will find it. But if you optimize for discovery, they will. And how do people discover websites? Either they're told about them, or they find a link to them somewhere, or it is indexed in a catalog. And that catalog is what we call Google, right? So if you want your website to be found in Google, you have to go through the process of understanding how that works. You have to optimize your website to be discovered. And most websites organically are discovered through Google search. And that's, the first place you can start. And there's a whole process for that. It's not just the starting point, which is making sure you have the right keywords there, and that you're putting a lot of content on your site that can be found. But there is a strategy for Google deciding that, out of all the sites out there, that you are important for a particular type of content. So you need to do your research on that. We don't have, time to dive into all of that today, but I'll start with saying that there's the piece of that matters is, other than figuring out the right headings and the right content that all maps to what you want to be all about. If you want to be the leader on Star Wars costumes, you got to make sure that you are creating content that talks about Star Wars costumes and that those words are used in the headings and the titles of the content you create. But beyond that, there's a system for creating lots of content that all relate to your main topic that lead people down a path. And the more you can create that path that shows people, oh yeah, I learned, about this type of costume, and then it led me to this other article about this type of costume and makeup or whatever. You lead them down the path. It keeps people on your site, and that lets the search engines know that you are the site for this type of content. You have to give them signals that they're going to the right place. So someone doesn't visit your website and then immediately leave because it was the wrong site for that type of content. That takes planning and strategy and some design element to that. And that's the work you need to say, don't just create content, design the content to work together to establish yourself as the known leader in that space that you want to live in. And so that's one piece of it. And then beyond that, once you've established that and you've kind of designed that, you have to think about your customer journey. How do they find you, and then where do you take them along the way? Once they've found your content, what are they supposed to do next? What do they want to do next? Are they buying that costume, or are they emailing their friends and asking? Are they creating little, looking at tutorials and creating little costume mashups? Like, what are they doing? What is the bundle, or what is the thing that you're sending them down? So all of us can apply that to our business. For me as a content creator and someone who talks about content marketing, I've got to decide when someone comes to my website, what are they learning? And then what do I send them to next? And then how do I help them in their journey? So, is it some kind of freebie? Is it some kind of course or webinar? Like, what am I taking them down the path of that they're going to want and use along the way? That's the power of owned media, is I'm now taking you on a journey and helping you along the way. And that's all designed. And when you think about that and you're designing your own media, I want you to think about not just how much can I create and stuff onto my website and into my social channels and all the other places that I want to own on social media, but also when someone's there, how do I take them through and make sure that they are going all the way through the journey to the end, which, might be my product or service, or just getting onto my list, which makes me now in charge of that communication with them. How do I take them from discovering me, consuming my content, all the way through to now being a subscriber or being on my email list so that I can now communicate with them on a regular basis? That's the part of discovery that matters, is you are finding a way to be findable. And then once they find you, they are staying in your world and then becoming a part of your communication channel. So that's the part of discovery I think people miss. And then beyond that, not just making yourself findable, but also I think people think, okay, I'll create this website or this social channel and I'll just keep posting and then people will eventually find it. Well, no. Beyond that, there are tactics in social media with, including hashtags, but also finding ways to make your content become more discoverable or viral, or paying for ads to help you do that. But we'll talk about that in the paid section. or within your own, as you design your website, you actually have to get out there and tell people about it. You might actually have to do the hand-to-hand combat to get your own channels discovered. And I think that's the other thing people miss is once you create this beautiful thing and this index of content and these, 100 shows of your podcast or your YouTube channel, you actually have to go out there and introduce people to it. And it's an old school tactic, but it's what really, if you're starting out, it's how it has to work. You have to generate word of mouth, which means you might have to go out there, shake some hands, network, go to the events where, that are in your industry where people that would look for you can find you, and make the steps necessary to connect with people directly. The direct outreach part of this is how you grow your owned media channel. And that's why we're focusing on that today. This is about owned. So the main way to grow an owned channel is, other than doing the structural part of it to make it findable, is to actually get out there and meet people and direct them to it. And you're going to be doing that already. But if you have a plan for that, and then you can tell them, what's the one thing that they usually want to ask? Make sure you have a piece of content that would answer that question and direct them to it. But actually, I wrote an article about that. You can go find it on my website here or on my podcast here. And then when they look you up or they look up that answer that you had given them, they'll find you because you've created now that owned asset, that owned media channel for them to go to. Or maybe they'll just Google you after they meet you, after they shook your hand and they walk away, and they might Google you. And now they'll find these own channels because they're looking for you directly. And you've established your own channel to be found. And that's the power of owned media is now, all the work you would be doing to network and to introduce yourself to people, you now have this powerful owned media presence behind you that supports you and tells your story more than you could have in a 5-minute conversation. And that's the power of owned media channels. And also they grow, over time, everything you create starts to compound and add on, and you build this massive index of content and what you're all about over time. And everyone that comes into your world starts to accumulate. So that's the first part of owned media channels. And, as we get into the next couple of solo shows over the next few weeks, we'll talk about earned media channels, which will be the, how do you get people to talk about you and use their audiences and PR and all of that to generate discovery. And then we'll get into finally the paid part of it, which is how do you pay for discovery through the different tools out there. But it all starts with owned, because if you don't have an owned channel, then you don't have anywhere to really drive people down the funnel. So what you want to make sure is that you've started with a strong foundation so that when people are out there and they start to figure out, what they're looking for, that you're findable in that space. So that's what I wanted to leave with you guys today. And, if you'd like to grow your personal brand and help more people discover your content, then just try to remember that you have to establish your own media channels. And if you've already established them, go back and look at them and say, do I have all these pieces figured out? Is it findable? Is there more I can be doing to optimize that findability? And is there more I could do to give people something to go to once they meet me in person? Be strategic. Be strategic about what you put on those channels, how you use them, how you optimize them, how you make them findable. That's what I got for you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's show. If you did, take a screen grab of the show, of the episode on your phone. Tag me on Instagram if you can post it there, @Brandon Birkmeyer. And remember, building your brand is a journey. It does take time. That's why we have this show. Just tackle these little items each day, each week, and move forward. Take little steps. I hope these tactics that we shared today were helpful. And I do thank you, as always, for your time. I do thank you for listening. And I will catch you all next time.
You've just taken your marketing knowledge to another level with this episode of Brands on Brands on Brands. But we have plenty more ways to not just help you build a business, but build a brand. Head over to brandonbrands.com for more resources, as well as access to our blogs, videos, and exclusive coaching sessions with your host. Be sure to visit brandonbrands.com.